How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? What's the real truth about Citizen Kane?
It'll probably turn out to be a very simple thing.
Hello, everybody. We hope you're doing well. I'm Parker.
And I'm Max.
And we've started the show Better Than Citizen Kane today so that we can ask the question, is it better than Citizen Kane? It's so amusing.
There'll be food and drinks and ghosts, and perhaps even a few rosebuds. And if you like Citizen Kane, that's fine, because you're all invited.
If any of you will spend the next hour or so with this podcast, I must remind you that when every film ever made is a reasonable contender for the title of greatest film of all time, you have to wonder, better than Citizen Kane?
Ah, but here come our other guests, as we take a look at House on Haunted Hill, 1959.
Very nice.
Very nice.
Very fun.
Yeah, for those of you watching visually, as if there was another way to watch, different vibes this week.
Different vibes in this.
We're holding our mics.
Yeah,
Trying
we decided to
something new.
get a little intimate with it. We're all friends now. This is
all
episode
friends here.
20.
We're all friends. It's been 20 episodes.
20 episodes.
Very exciting.
Wow,
I think there's only
Look at
5
that.
left in the year after this.
that is crazy.
Yeah. But anyway,
Anyway,
we have a lot more to talk about as we
Yes.
discuss House on Haunted Hill. Parker, what's your history with House on Haunted Hill?
okay, so back in like junior high and high school, as we've discussed my lore in depth, I was getting into movies, and specifically, I latched onto. I really liked like classic Universal horror movies,
Sure.
like the Frankenstein's, the Draculas,
Yeah.
Invisible Man, all those. Not because they were good movies per se, but because like I knew they were classics, so I wanted to kind of check those out, and I really loved like the art direction of these kind of classic horror movies. I
Sure,
like the way
yeah.
I like the vibes, you
Yeah.
know. And because of that, I started getting into like classic horror. Modern horror has never really been my thing. I don't like horror movies that make you feel gross afterwards.
Right.
We've talked about that a little
Yeah,
bit.
we have.
And so like older horror movies are just kind of spooky and atmospheric, and I like that. And so in pursuit of that, I used to be a huge purveyor of the $5 movie bin at like Walmart.
Yeah.
Just grab anything and everything there that like looked interesting. And they used to sell these big like combo packs, and it's like 100 westerns, 100 horror, and like I just thought I was like, oh, that's a good deal because it was like $10 for
Yeah.
like 100 movies. And as I did more research and grew older, I realized the reason they were able to do these deals is because all of these movies that they would have in these packs were public domain.
Gotcha.
There were all the copyrights
Right.
had either lapsed or hadn't been taken care of in the first place, but they had like famous actors in them, right?
Yeah.
So like you'd see Bela Lugosi in one of these movies, even though it wasn't like a crazy, well put together movie
Right.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And so because of that, like I grabbed this pack of like 100 classic horror. Most of them were garbage. I did not watch all of them. I would kind of like see if a title grabbed my attention, and then I would look up the movie to see if like, is this even worth my time?
Yeah.
And there were a few in there that I liked, but specifically House on Haunted Hill was in that mix. And I was like, this is so much fun. Like I loved this movie the first time I watched it.
Yeah.
And because it was part of this pack, I just assumed that it was like, all right, it's this weird little novelty thing that nobody else talks about, but like, except Vincent Price, and I like Vincent Price. And then just a few years ago, I got like curious because I wanted to watch it, and I was explaining it to somebody who had never seen it before. And I was like, what do people actually think of this? So I
Right.
looked it up. It had like, I don't know exactly what it has right this second, but like when I looked at it, it was like a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes or something, which isn't always like, I've been on the
Right.
record of like not a
Is that from critics or is that from
critics.
fans?
That is
Wow,
a critic
okay.
score.
Wow.
Like 95% or something.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's crazy.
That is
and
pretty
so
crazy.
I was like, wow, I'm glad other people like this movie.
Yeah.
But I'm going to look up. Well, you talk about what your history was at. I want to know like what the Rotten Tomato score is now.
Yeah, I know that the and again, none of this really matters, but I know that like the Metacritic score is like 6.8. So
Okay.
like some people are like, it's not very good.
Sure.
Yeah. Also, apologies if my audio just got better. I realized I was holding my mic in such a way that the field wasn't correct, but it's all figured out now. And let's
got
just
it
pretend it was for a dramatic Halloween effect, because this is coming out the day before Halloween, which is super exciting.
Very fun.
Anyway, my history with House on Haunted Hill. I don't even know really how I heard about it. I feel like you probably recommended it to me. I don't know. I saw it somewhere. Maybe just on Letterboxd. I just saw maybe you watched it or something. But I went to the library and I found it, and it was included in a DVD with that and Vincent Price in The Bat. And I don't recall anything about what that one was about because I didn't watch it. Sorry to The Bat. But yeah, I watched it in like June. Like it was a summer night. And I watched it, and it was a little out of season, but I was like, this is super fun. And then when I watched it the next year, I think at one of your like movie nights, one of your screenings.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just really fun. And that's really my only history with it is I stumbled onto it from someone recommending, or I saw it somewhere and I went and watched it. And it's just really fun.
Yeah.
And that's it. I've seen it 3 times.
Sure.
And that's it.
That's fair.
Don't have too much of a connection to it.
That's okay.
But I appreciate you mentioning like how it's it's included in those because it's public domain, because it is, I don't know, it's a weird small movie.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Like it has this vibe of like it just feels small. Because it's like super low budget, obviously, but also like it still has like an energy about it. It has a spark to it.
Totally.
Because you can watch I'm sure you watched all those other like Vincent Price in B-movie horror.
Yeah.
And I'm sure not all of them were this good.
No.
Which is saying something, because this isn't a particularly great movie.
No.
In the typical sense.
Sure.
Right? In like the crafting sense.
Yeah.
But it knows what it is, and it's doing it really well.
It's vibey
Which we'll
as
talk
hell.
about. Yeah, it's so there's a lot of good vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that more, I think, in the criteria. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
I did look it up. It's 79% critic score,
Okay,
which is
yeah.
still pretty high for
pretty
this
high,
movie.
pretty solid.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Made me happy when I saw that. But
Yeah.
yeah. So do you want to tackle the summary, or should I?
I can.
Okay.
Yeah, this will be fun
Great.
for me to do. We open with a scream, not unlike this episode. If the plan goes accordingly. But yeah, so it opens with a scream, and then a floating head of Pritchard, one of the characters, shows up, and he talks about how his sister was murdered in a
Yeah.
house. Right? It was his sister. He's like, my sister was murdered here,
Along with
along with.
7 other people.
He's just a really nervous little guy.
Yeah.
And he talks about murders, and he's like, ghosts. And then there's like some chains.
Yeah.
Maybe that was just before that. Right? Any important information there?
One little tidbit that I found that sources were a little bit vague on this, but there was more evidence than maybe some other points we're going to bring up later of the opening of this movie popularized Halloween spook tracks for parties. So you just buy a record that was just scary sounds.
Totally. Yeah.
This movie, like, I don't think it was the first to do it, but it helped popularize that idea.
Yeah.
Into the 60s.
Right. Man.
Which I just thought was fun.
60s was a good decade for Halloween.
Good decade for
50s
some
and
spooky
60s.
stuff.
Great. But yeah, so he talks about ghosts and murder and stuff in this house. And then his head pulls back and vanishes.
Yes.
And then Vincent Price's head appears. And we
Vincent
both
Price.
can't do a Vincent Price impression.
No, I'm working on
unfortunately.
it,
It feels
but I
like
can't-
something that we should be able to do.
It's in there somewhere.
We've got to
I just haven't
find
found it yet.
But his head appears and he goes, "Hello, I'm Frederick Lauren, and I'm planning a Halloween party at this haunted house party for my wife. She's so amusing. There's gonna be ghosts, drinks, murder. Basically, he's invited a bunch of guests to this house, and whoever can spend the entire night wins $10,000. Right?
Yep. Which adjusted for inflation is like $100,000. We
Yeah.
found.
So understandable.
Yeah, worth it.
Yeah, worth it. Except for when those tax guys get you. That's how they get you. Anyway. Yeah, so that's the conceit of the film, and then he goes, but here come our other guests. We get a parade of all the guests in their cars being driven up to the house, and he's talking about them, and he goes, this one's a politician or whatever, right? One of them's a doctor,
Yeah, doctor, politician, test pilot,
one
a
of
girl
them-
who works at his
just a
company.
girl who works at his company.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just your typical group of guys and gals and ghouls a little later. But yeah, so they all arrive at the house. Really cool house. It's a Frank Lloyd Wright house. It's very Egyptian inspired. All of the exterior shots were shot there, and then all the interior shots are just a stage somewhere.
Yeah, I saw an interview with the set designer who said that obviously they weren't allowed to film inside the house, but he got a tour of it like while they were
Oh,
planning. He says,
okay.
it's the weirdest house you've ever been in.
Oh,
He's like, it
man.
just doesn't make sense, and like a bunch of the walls are made of glass and they meet at points that weren't properly sealed, so it would leak. And then
Oh.
also the wind would come through as a scream between like the panels
So
of
the
the
house
glass.
is like super haunted in
It's
real
super
life.
haunted in real life.
I mean, haunted in the way that a lot of houses are, which is just poorly
Yeah,
constructed.
exactly. But I just thought it was so funny that the set designer was like, yeah, this house was insane.
Yeah. Well, so long, Frank Lloyd Wright. Yeah. So they all arrive at the party, and we're introduced to Vincent Price and his wife. Specifically, their names are Frederick and Annabelle, right? Lauren. And immediately, the vibes with this couple are crazy.
Their dynamic is so funny.
It's so funny.
It's
kind of the meat of the movie.
Totally,
Like, this
and
movie
it's
wouldn't
like-
be nearly as fun if that wasn't
the base of dark comedy to
Yeah.
the whole thing of just like there's just this tension between the two of simultaneously like ridiculous sexual tension and chemistry, but also like they want to kill each other.
They hate
They
each other.
hate each other.
And doesn't that just make it all the hotter for them?
Absolutely.
And it does. Just really good, just quips and roasts. Just good, very fun. It's just very
Well,
fun. And
you,
they're
you
just,
and I were watching this movie together, and there's a scene early on where she's getting ready and she's refusing to come to the party, and he just grabs her hair and like yanks it back. He's like, "You will go to the party," and just her reaction. You and I just looked at each other. It's like, "Well,
she's into
she's
that.
Really enjoying
Feels like
that."
she's in. Yeah, it's so funny, and it really I think makes the movie
Totally.
by far. Because if this wasn't that, then you'd be like, this is kind of boring.
Yeah.
Because I would say that from there, we go down. Vincent Price goes down. He goes, "Hello, everyone." There's little coffins with guns in them, which are like the party favors, which is so funny and awesome. And we're introduced to everybody. A chandelier almost falls and kills a lady. I wish I remembered any of their names, but they're not really characters.
doesn't really
None of them
matter.
are characters except for
Yeah.
like Pritchard, Vincent Price, and Annabelle.
Right.
And then there's the main girl who I
Yeah.
can't remember
I'll
the name
pull
of.
the rest so that we have a reference
Thank
point, but
you.
don't imagine that we're going to keep repeating these names. 'cause
These
they're-
characters aren't. It's not
they're
super
not.
important that you know these characters.
No, not in the least.
Because I've seen it 3 times and I don't know them.
I've seen this a lot, and I couldn't tell you the names of
So-
most of these characters.
Yeah. So then they just kind of start walking through the house? Question mark.
Yeah.
Like, what-
Okay. So test pilot is Lance.
Lance,
Dr. David Trent.
David. I remember him.
Nora.
Nora's
is
the main
ingenue.
girl.
Pritchett and Ruth Bridges.
Bridges.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's our group.
Okay, great. Yeah. So then, why do they go to the cellar?
They go to the cellar because Pritchard is like showing them the history of the house
Oh,
or
that's
whatever.
right.
And he's like, all these terrible things
Right.
happened in this house. And then he opens up the floor and shows them the vat of acid.
Right. Well, before that, before Vincent Price appears, they're like, "Do any of us know each other? Like, are
Right.
we all strangers? Have we met before?" So
And they're also like, well, have you met our host even?
yeah,
And they're like,
they
no.
haven't. Which is like, okay, this was I told Parker this is pre the serial killer era of America, because people got a mysterious invitation to win $10,000 at a haunted house with
From somebody
strangers
they
from
did
someone they
not
don't know,
know.
and they went, "Yeah, all right,
Yeah, I'll go."
Yeah, for sure, totally." Kind of sucks that the modern version of this would be like Mr. Beast video, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway,
And they like briefly discuss a little bit why all of them are there of like
Right.
Ruth has some sort of debts she needs to take care
right.
of.
Pritchard came for the money, he says, but Frederick doubts that.
Right. And then Nora is like taking care of her family. Like
Yeah.
she supports her entire
Right,
family on
right,
her own
right.
salary, and so she needs the money.
Yeah,
Lance, I think, is there for the thrill of it
yeah.
because he's a test
It's a
pilot.
test
And he's like,
pilot.
oh, this
It's
seems
like,
kind of
oh,
fun.
yeah.
Do they establish any reason why Dr. Trent is there? Like, other than just,
Nope.
well, I mean,
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that,
But,
but-
no.
on the face of it, I think it's just, again,
A
sort
doctor
of a
who showed
casual
up. Yeah.
interest.
Yeah. But yeah, Pritchard,
Mm-hmm.
who's there, he's the one who's like, "You're all stupid for coming to this house because there's
You
been
need to
8
leave.
murders.
8 murders in this
One of them was my sister, and the house takes people."
Mm-hmm.
This Pritchard like experienced the haunting of Hill House, and then went here and was like, "This house kills people."
I so rarely am interested to know what happens before stories. Like prequels aren't my thing. I need a Pritchard prequel. I
Yeah,
need to
this
know
guy's
like
shaking up.
I need to know what happened to his sister and what his like engagement with that was.
He's like if Eleanor survived the haunting, you
Yeah.
know? Like and then just kept coming back to the house and being
spooked.
like, please don't come
just
here.
dead behind the eyes, like frazzled.
He is not okay.
No, not in the least.
Anyway, so he starts taking everyone on a tour of the house.
Right.
He's like, that blood stain is the... And then they go to the cellar. And he's like, this is a giant vat of acid that
And
bodies
to prove
are
his
thrown in."
point, he grabs a rat trap and
And
tosses
he
the rat in.
in, and then the little rat skeleton comes up.
Yes, because he makes the point of like it eats flesh and hair, and then
Yeah.
the bones rise up.
Yeah, and Parker loves the little rat
I
skeleton.
love the little rat skeleton.
If there's one thing about Parker, it's that he loves a little rat
I
skeleton.
love a little rat skeleton.
Yeah, and then they all go upstairs, but Nora and Lance get stuck behind. There's also a funny line earlier where they're like, do you two know each other about Nora and Lance? And I was like, what, just because they're young and hot? Just young people? Don't you know all young people
Don't you know
each
all
other?
young people ever in the vicinity of this house?
Yeah.
I suppose.
Well, they didn't know each other, but they quickly meet up and start doing walking around a haunted house shenanigans. Mm-hmm.
Because they also recognize that they are young
They're
and
like,
hot.
I guess we're the main
They're like,
characters.
I guess we have the main character.
I guess we have the
energy.
most chemistry out of anyone, so I guess we'll start wandering around together.
Yep.
But Nora gets separated from Lance.
Yeah, because they stick around behind, and
Yeah.
she's asking him specific questions like, "How do you know him?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "I don't."
Yeah.
And they're looking around or whatever. They get separated.
They get separated, and then the lights are out, and then Nora looks behind her into a doorway, and an old woman floats into vision from the darkness in that doorway, and then just floats, back
straight
into
back.
it. And Nora is really freaked out by this. Gets Lance. They look around.
Yeah.
They don't see her, right? And then do they go upstairs or
They
do
go
st-
upstairs because they're like, "Oh, hey, like ghosts."
Yeah, she's like, I saw a ghost. And they're like,
Like, okay,
all right.
whatever.
Meanwhile, there's like another scene with Frederick and Annabelle, right? Around here.
Yeah, he goes back upstairs to check on Annabelle.
He's like, are you coming to this party I planned for you? And she's like, And he's like, I think that's when he like lifts her
Yeah,
hair up and is like, you're going to come to this party. And she's like, I'm coming to the party.
Yeah.
And then they all go back downstairs, right? At some
Yeah.
point, and they look around.
Yeah, I think they're looking for her ghost.
They're looking for her ghost. They don't find it.
Nobody believes her, and she's upset about it.
Yeah.
Lance sticks around to try and comfort her.
Yeah. Just right back in the cellar again.
Yeah.
And then they get separated again because Lance goes through a doorway.
Yeah, because he's trying to figure out, he's like, well, where could it have come from? And so he's
Right.
pounding on the door. He's like, this sounds hollow. Go to the other side. Go to
Yeah.
like the other room
Yeah.
right next to this.
Yeah. And then Ghost Woman just floats right past her out the doorway.
Yeah, because she turns around and she's right there.
She's right
and
there.
The ghost woman is doing
in
claw
like a,
hands.
like a
and,
Nosferatu pose.
Yeah, a freaky smile.
Yeah, and then just
It just-
just like zooms right past her.
Mm-hmm.
Lance walks in and he's like, well, I would have seen her. You
Right.
know?
Well, she goes up for help because he's
right.
locked in the room.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, help, there's a ghost and I can't get to Lance. And,
No, I thought he came in.
No, he hits his head.
No, but he comes in and talks to her and he's like, I surely would have seen her coming out as I come in. Right?
Probably.
Anyway, and then he hits his
There's
head.
too many cellar scenes.
There's too many, yeah, and it's weird that they don't all happen at the same time. It's like
Right.
breaks in between.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, the basic- the
and then
basic
Lance
brush-
hits his
brush
head,
strokes.
gets locked in a room. She gets everyone. They come down. They get Lance out, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't know." Right?
Yeah.
That's basically his
Yeah,
reaction.
he's like, I don't know.
yeah.
And they're like, man, that's weird. Like the only way you could have like gotten an injury like that is if you like ran headlong into that wall. He's like, well, I didn't do that. Somebody
Right.
hit me.
Yeah. Interesting.
Interesting.
So then they go upstairs. Again.
Yeah. Again.
Right?
Yes.
And is this where Nora's like freaking out? No, that comes later.
Yeah. There's a couple of those.
There's a lot of those.
There's a lot
Most
of
of this
those.
movie is just Nora experiencing something scary and freaking out.
Yeah.
They all get shown to their rooms, right? Around here?
Around here, yeah, because this is Annabelle hasn't come down yet.
Right.
And they all get sewn to their rooms. Nora finds a head
Yes.
in her suit, like her
Yeah,
luggage.
she finds like a severed head.
freaks out,
freaks
runs
out.
downstairs, tells
And
everybody
it's
about
interesting, there's this, like, you pointed it out this time that I hadn't noticed before, is that everyone's constantly just not hearing Nora screaming.
it. Yeah.
Like, they're just like, where could she be? And then she runs in screaming. Like, they didn't hear her the whole time until she got there. And, like, later that happens again and again. So Nora comes running in. She's like, I don't want to stay here anymore. She goes to Lance. She's like, you got to get me out of here. And then because while she's upstairs, doesn't a hand grab her? I think we skipped some stuff.
It's tough to keep track of.
A
lot of these scenes end up blurring.
she's hiding next to a curtain, and then she like finds a curtain opening at the end of the hallway because you think it's a wall.
Yeah.
She walks through, and then a hand reaches out, and this man gets her, and he goes,
Right.
"Come with us. He'll kill you." Mm-hmm. And that's when she runs downstairs.
Right.
But she also ran downstairs after the head.
Exactly.
Right?
There's a lot of going upstairs and downstairs repeatedly, and then the parlor
Nora.
is like
The parlor is just
the
people
main
are just
hub
sitting in
of
the parlor.
everything. Okay, yada yada
Yeah,
yada.
pull up the synopsis, Parker.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at
We're
right
doing
now.
a really great job of explaining this movie.
Well, to be fair, like even reading the synopsis, I think people are like missing a lot of this. Yeah, because even these like really detailed synopses are missing the main pieces of like when all of this happens.
Right.
But okay.
I mean, we can just breeze through it.
I think
She sees a
honestly, I
head,
don't
she
think it
gets
really
scared.
matters.
A man pulls her aside in like a secret room and goes, "Come with us, he'll kill you." And she freaks out and runs downstairs.
Yeah.
That happens a lot. She runs downstairs and she goes, "Lance, get me out of here." And then Vincent Price is like, "Oh, well, I'm sorry." And then they turn to the door and before he says, "Well, I'm sorry," they turn to the door and there's the old woman ghost and the man who grabbed Nora and said, "Come with us, he'll kill you."
Yeah.
Looking quite scary.
Sure.
And then Frederick just goes, "Oh, those are the caretakers of the house. His wife is blind."
She is blind, you know.
And we're like, she was floating.
She was literally
She was
floating.
not walking. She was floating
she was
around.
gliding along.
Was she on a little hoverboard?
I suppose.
She's really ahead of the times. But yeah, like they don't really explain that. Of like why I guess it's just to be scary, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway. So yeah, at this point he's like, okay, they're gonna lock the doors. And I'm gonna let you all make a decision on whether you want to stay or leave. And if you choose to stay, then you can earn your 10,000, but you can leave if you're too scared.
Yep.
And then the caretakers lock the doors before anyone gets the chance to choose. And he goes, "Well, I was going to give you a choice, but now they've made that choice for you."
Right. And right before this scene, Lance meets Annabelle. And
Oh,
she's
right.
pulling the moves on him and also says, like, my husband's trying to kill me. I need you
Right.
to help keep me safe.
Okay, right, yeah.
So we established that. They go downstairs and they're locked in now.
They're locked in now.
They've got their little guns.
He gives them all the guns from the coffins. And then they basically all just go, "Well, let's just go in our rooms."
Yeah, they're like, all right, well,
It's like,
good night, everyone.
And then, yeah, good night, everyone. So they all go to their rooms. They go to bed. And what happens from here?
They go to their rooms and then they hear a scream. The one scream they do hear.
Right.
And they rush out and it's just Annabelle is hung.
And I'll say this: this is the only part of the movie that freaks me out.
Sure.
Every time, because there's something just very upsetting about a hanging body.
Totally.
Obviously.
Obviously.
And they do this scare twice. Spoilers. Spoilers. We're describing the entire movie.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, that's upsetting. They
Yeah.
go lay Annabelle down. Vincent Price comes in and goes, "Oh, my wife's dead." Right? It's just a lot of like running around
There is.
and spooky things
Yeah.
happening.
And every synopsis I'm reading for this is so funny because a lot of them just refer to like having encountered further apparitions. Like nobody is straight on the order of everything
Yeah.
that happens in this
Yeah.
movie. But Annabelle
Dies.
appears to have committed suicide and hung herself.
And Vincent Price says suicide in the coolest way anyone's ever said it, which is like
Suicide.
suicide. And it's just unbelievably good.
It's great. It's really good.
Yeah. And I don't know, just general running around, haunting shenanigans.
Yeah. There's a lot of like escalating freakouts for
Nora. And at one point, Trent is like, "I know what you're doing, Lauren. Like, stop trying to scare Nora." And he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about."
Yeah.
Right? And then there's like a rope comes through her window and wraps around her leg
Right,
and leaves
because
Annabelle's
Nora's
ghost.
disappeared. Like she just isn't. Like she after everything happens with Annabelle, nobody knows where she is, and then she confides
Oh,
in
that's
Lance, and she's like, "I'm
right.
hiding. You need to hide me."
Yeah.
And he's like, "All right, stay in your room. Here's the gun. Like if anybody comes
Yeah,
in,
because
like,
she says that Frederick tried to kill her. And he's like, "Okay, well, if he thinks you're dead, you can hide in your room,
yeah,
and he won't ever look for you."
right,
And then while she's in her room is when a rope comes through her window. There's bars on all the windows. A rope wraps around her leg, and she sees an apparition of Annabelle outside. And the rope winds back down, and Annabelle goes away. And we'll get to that.
She's freaked
I have
out.
some points about that. She's freaked out again.
And she runs out of the room because she can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And she runs all the way downstairs into the cellar.
Yes.
And she's freaked out. And it's very, very dark. And somebody else comes down the stairs.
Well, but also, before this, cut to Trent wakes up Annabelle.
Oh, is this before that? I couldn't remember if this was before or right
that.
after.
It's before that, because then he goes.
Yes.
So Trent comes into Annabelle's room. Annabelle's alive. Shock. And they're lovers.
There's a nice little ADR line of, get this hanging harness off me.
Yeah, it's really good. And like an insert shot
Yeah.
of like a hanging harness. And basically it's revealed that they're lovers, and their plan is to scare Nora so bad that she kills Frederick for them just out of fear. And then they get to be together.
Yeah.
And that's it, right?
Right.
And then
Annabelle weirdly starts growing a conscience at
she's
this
like,
point.
"Are we sure about this?" And he's
like, have we gone too far?
He's like, "No,
Yeah, it's
no
fine.
one's ever gonna know it's us, because why would we ever do this? It's crazy."
Right.
Yeah, man, it's pretty.
I love
weird.
that that's their airtight alibi. It's crazy.
It's
no
crazy.
one would do
No
this.
one would ever expect us to do this because it's weird as hell.
It's weird, and nobody could summarize it properly. Why would we do it?
And they're right for that.
They're right for that.
So anyway, Nora runs downstairs. She's afraid. Everyone else, I'm guessing, is just either hanging out in the parlor or asleep.
Yeah, I don't know. The rest of the
Everyone
cast just kind of
vanishes,
disappears.
'cause yeah.
Oh, Lance gets hit over the head and like locked away.
Oh yeah,
He's
does,
behind the sliding
He
door.
does, but they don't really like show
Yeah.
that much until the
It's
end.
just like we have to get rid of our hero.
Yeah.
So that
It's
Nora's by
it's
herself.
just so weird.
It's very strange.
Anyway, that's when Nora runs downstairs. Frederick comes down after her. He goes, "Nora, wait." And then she shoots him.
Yeah.
And then she's like,
She screams and
she
freaks
runs
out.
upstairs. And then Trent comes down.
Yeah.
And he's like, gonna throw Frederick in the acid pit. And then the lights go out and there's a scuffle. And then you hear like a spsh. And then Annabelle comes down a little while later. And she goes, "David, is it done? You know, whatever." And then out of the acid, Parker, what happens?
A skeleton rises.
A skeleton comes out of the acid. And Vincent Price's voice starts talking to her and says like, "You have everything now. You know,
Yeah, you dig
including
me
my
in."
soul," or whatever. And like, "Come with me, murderess." And the skeleton puts a
Starts
dainty little hand
screaming.
on her shoulder. And it's clearly on wires, and it's wonderful.
It's wonderful. He's just kind of hobbling along, and
Yeah.
she's screaming her head off. This scene is very iconic. I see this and the sound of her scream remixed a lot.
Oh,
People
yeah.
like put this in things
Right.
all over
Yeah.
the place.
Skeleton walks her over to the acid pit. And then he like does like
He shoves
a
her.
push.
He just goes.
The skeleton doesn't move in a scary way.
No,
He's very
not
much
at
like
all.
moving on wires. 'Cause you
Totally.
can see the wires.
Yeah, but she falls in.
She falls in.
Dissolves.
And then there's a long period of just panning across the
Yes,
cellar.
which I found out a little bit about. So
Okay.
what happens at the end of the pan? First
Yeah, at the end of the pan, Vincent Price walks out and he has this contraption of just yarn
Yep.
going up to the ceiling, which looks super visible. And he steps out and he kind of like smiles because he was controlling the skeleton.
Yes.
He killed Trent.
Yes.
And then he says, like, "I knew you were going to do something like this, so I planned this party."
Yeah, he's like, you planned the perfect murder, and when you started playing your game of murder, you didn't realize I was playing too.
Which is really fun. What did you learn about this?
Okay, so background of this movie is William Castle, the producer and director, was known as like the king of the gimmick. That was his whole thing. He would come up with an idea of what could we do to mess with audiences, to have something interactive, and then build a movie around this. So in 1958, he comes up with the idea of emergo, is what he calls it. And basically the idea is like, okay, we're going to have a full-sized or even oversized sometimes skeleton fly out over the audience. And then he went to screenwriter Rob White and he said, okay, here is the idea. Write a movie around this.
Right.
Like that is the only thing we need is just a skeleton needs to go over the audience.
And initially, he wanted it to be more of just like a typical scary, like people locked in a house movie. And then Rob White, I think, was like, "No, you got to do it differently. You got to do it like this.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. He brought some of those
He
ideas.
brought more
in.
of those ideas.
But that was like the germ of the idea was nothing other than here is a gimmick, write the movie around it.
Yeah.
So that's what we end up with. And what I found out was that I had always assumed when I heard about this that the skeleton came out when you saw the skeleton.
Yeah.
And that isn't the case. It comes out after Annabelle's been pushed into the vat,
Right.
which is why that long pan exists. The pan is there
Yeah.
as background for the skeleton to be doing its thing in the theater.
Because then when you pan over to Vincent Price with the contraption, it looks like he's controlling it.
Exactly.
That's nice.
Because I'd always assumed when I'd heard about this that it came out when the skeleton comes out.
Yeah.
And then I did some research and I saw there's a really fun little rabbit hole if you ever want to go down of just looking up on YouTube different theaters doing their version of like the Emergo thing.
Yeah, I watched the ones you sent me, and they're all great.
They're all great and they're all different
They're
too.
all very different.
Like my favorite one was probably, it doesn't go out over the audience, but like a hole in the pit of the stage opens and like a giant, like huge skeleton comes out and like it's marionetted a little bit and it waves at the audience
And everyone
everybody's-
laughs.
They're
It's
all
great.
having a great time.
Yeah.
Some of them fly out over the audience.
Yep.
Some of them just sort of like appear in the air.
And they just kind of
go wobble for a minute.
like dangle around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I'd heard about this originally, I just always assumed that it showed up when the skeleton shows up. But then watching those, I was like, oh, that's why that shot is there. That really
That's
extended
interesting.
pan is meant to be a background for the skeleton doing its thing.
That's so interesting.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Fun.
Very fun.
Fun stuff.
The ending to this is wild because it just it cuts to everyone getting the sliding door to open somehow, getting Lance out, and they all go downstairs. And Nora's like, "I shot Frederick. He's dead. I killed him." And they're like, "Oh, we better go get the body." And whatever. And Pritchard's like, "Another one joins the ghosts in the house," because he's having the worst time of
He's
his
just
life.
having a bad day.
But he also chose to go there,
True.
so that's on you, dude.
That's on you.
They all go down, and Frederick's there, and he goes, "No, Nora, you didn't kill me. I loaded your gun with blanks. You see, my wife and Trent were having an affair and were going to kill me, but I got to them first." And then he goes upstairs, and they're just left to like...
Well, it's weird because like he simultaneously admits guilt and doesn't. He's like, Trent tried to throw him in the acid. We struggled. My wife tripped and fell.
Yeah.
I did not. I shoved her in the
Yeah.
vat with my skeleton.
And then he goes,
puppet.
"Anyway."
I'm ready for justice to decide if I'm innocent or guilty. And then he just walks out. And they're just left being like,
They don't say anything. They don't do anything. They don't react really at
No.
all. But if I were there, I'd be like, I think this guy
Hey,
just
what the
killed
hell?
his wife. But I'm really confused.
yeah, I don't know what's happened.
Also, the effects budget in this house is crazy.
It's crazy.
How'd they do the rope thing? Because that's the thing about this movie is how did they do most of the ghost stuff?
Yeah.
The piano playing itself, which is wonderful, and I forgot to mention earlier,
Yes.
is great.
I love the
But
piano
like
playing
the
itself.
rope winding up and Annabelle being outside. I guess you're
Yeah.
just supposed to just be like, they figured out a way to do
Figured
that.
out a way to do that.
Mirrors and such.
Sure. The bloody head in her suitcase, and then she comes back and her suitcase is not stained or
Right.
gooey or bloody
Well,
at
but
all.
Lance does find the head hanging in the closet.
He does,
and
yes.
takes it
Yeah.
downstairs.
So like
and
we
he's
know that that's there, but just like when it shows the shot, it looks like so
Yeah.
visceral and wet.
Yeah.
And then like it's like, oh no, the
They
suitcase
put
is
a
fine.
tarp down before they put the head in her suitcase. And right as the movie's ending, Pritchard looks at the camera and he goes, "There are now, 9 ghosts at the house on Haunted Hill, and they're gonna come for me, and then they'll come for you." And it's meant to be scary, but I'm like, the ghosts weren't real.
Yeah, there are no ghosts.
There's no ghosts in this movie, so it's a weird thing to try
Although,
and sell us on.
the one thing that we talked about a little bit and we brushed over in the summary is that early on in the film, Pritchard is showing them around the house and he's like, oh, see that stain up on the ceiling? That's blood. We don't know, like it never stopped coming. Like even after they move the bodies, it's still there. And then blood drips onto Ruth's hand. And he's like,
Right.
they've marked you now.
And then it happens again later.
It happens again later. And there's no explanation for that tied
Right.
in with the rest of like Annabelle's
Yeah.
plot, right?
Yeah.
So you could make the argument that there might be some spooks going on.
I don't not believe him. I just feel like it's a weird note
It
for
is
the
a weird
filmmakers
note.
to be like, let's throw in another. It just feels kind of lazy. Like,
It
we'll
is.
throw in another one.
Yeah. This movie lazy? No. No. Nuh-uh. Nuh-uh.
No, this movie isn't lazy at all. It definitely wasn't made to suit a gimmick.
No. Not in the slightest.
But hey, fun fact: Robert Mitchum's sister plays Bridges.
Yeah, this is
Bruce
also her
Bridges.
last film.
Yeah, and that Night of the Hunter.
Night of the Hunter,
There's a
baby.
tie-in. There you go.
Yeah, there we go.
So that's House on Haunted Hill. Any other? I'm good to jump into criteria if you are.
I think there's like one or two other trivia tidbits I wanted to talk about. So Emergo specifically was designed because the boom of 3D movies had died out at this point. That was early 50s and this is late 50s. And William Castle's whole pitch was he's like, well, we'll do actual 3 dimensions. Like, I'll bring something into the space physically was like his whole idea with it or whatever, which is fun and silly. And like, it's fun seeing the revival ones. And then there's a couple of stills I found of like theaters that did it at the time.
Right.
And the skeleton looks huge.
Yeah.
And like by some accounts it glowed in the dark.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was that on repeat viewings, like teens would come back and throw stuff at it because they knew it was there and they knew it was coming. So like you'd have contests of like throwing popcorn and they'd bring slingshots and like, and William Castle like didn't care because reportedly he's like, they paid for their ticket. Like I got their money. It doesn't matter. They came back a second time.
Yeah.
They can go nuts on the skeleton. Go crazy. I don't care. Which is just...
William, you could have just opened a room with a skeleton in it.
Yeah, you could have just done that.
Just a big skeleton. I'm sure people would have paid just the same.
Yeah. But I love the idea of this, like, of the time becoming its own version of, like, Rocky Horror, where people, like, bring stuff to physically interact with the movie and, like, throw shit and just all of that.
Well, and there's still the revival screenings to this day of bringing a skeleton out, which is nice.
Which is interesting because, again, this movie is in the public domain, but Universal, who bought out Allied Artists, still gets requests all the time for like 35 millimeter prints, which I think they have.
Okay.
So even though they don't own the copyright, they have like the film negatives.
Okay.
So art houses will reach out to them periodically and say like, hey, we want to do like a specific film screening of this.
That's really
which
fun.
I think is cool.
I like that.
The other thing, and we were talking about it a little bit before, and then we wanted to save it for the podcast. There's a trivia bit that gets tossed around a lot with this.
And I feel like this could take us into criteria.
Perfect.
Starting with the criteria of historical and historical and cultural relevance.
Yeah.
And this trivia point. Yeah. Good.
So a trivia point that gets tossed around a lot when you're looking around online trying to do research. Doing research on this movie is tough. There's just not a lot.
I kept trying to find like anything.
The only things like I dug into like William Castle's like the tidbits I could find of like his autobiography. But yeah, it's just tough. And so because of that, there's stuff floating around that like there's not a lot of sources for. And one that gets mentioned a lot is that this movie did really well with a low budget. Like that's William Castle's whole thing, is that he knew how to turn a profit really well. And so I think the budget was something like $250,000 and it made like 2.5 million or something. So yeah, it did very, very well for itself. And because of that, a tidbit you've seen tossed around a lot online is that the success of this movie inspired Hitchcock to make his own low-budget horror movie the following year, Psycho, in 1960. And that sounds nice on paper, but everything I know about the way films are made, that feels really early. To see this movie come out in 59 and then be like, oh yes, I'm inspired to make my own, and then turn that around in a year?
Yeah.
That seems unlikely to me.
But, hang on.
No, you're good.
I'm doing some
He's researching.
On the fly research.
Oh my God, he's pulled out a leather tome. He's brushing dust off. Where did you get this?
I just blew dust off of it. This is the Necronomicon.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Good. Surely nothing
Did
bad.
Bruce Campbell let you borrow that?
Yeah, he did.
That's so nice of him.
Okay, so here's the thing. I just looked at the Necronomicon.
Great.
Everyone close your eyes. Don't look at the video.
Don't look at the video. Look at the
Ruins the illusion. This was released February 17th, 1959.
Okay.
Psycho started filming November 11th, 1959, which would give you like a period of like almost the whole year.
Sure, but how long was it in development though? Like what was the pre-production on Psycho?
If only we'd had the foresight.
If only we'd had the foresight to figure this out.
It's based on Robert Bloch's 1959 novel of the same name.
Okay.
So
it could be a situation where the book is gaining popularity and gets optioned it shows up on Hitchcock's desk and he's like, I don't know. I'm not really sure. Looks to the success of House on Haunted Hill. And he's like, hey, there is money to be made. There is an audience for this. Maybe I could do something.
Yeah.
And decides to jump on it.
Yeah. So this says that Peggy Robertson, Hitchcock's, this is just the Wikipedia page.
Sure.
Through the Necronomicon. Hitchcock's longtime assistant read Anthony Boucher's positive review of the novel in his Criminals at Large column of the New York Times, decided to show the book to Hitchcock. However, studio readers at Paramount had already rejected its premise for a film. Hitchcock acquired rights to the novel for $9,500, ordered Robertson to buy all copies to preserve the novel's surprises.
I did hear about that.
This is our little Psycho episode.
Mini-sode.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a full one sometime. And then Hitchcock had come face, genre competitors whose works were critically compared to his own, and he was seeking new material to recover from 2 aborted projects with Paramount, Flamingo Feather and No Bail for the Judge. He disliked Starr's salary demands and trusted only a few people to choose prospective material, including Robertson. Paramount executives balked at Hitchcock's proposal and refused to provide his usual budget. In response, Hitchcock offered to film Psycho quickly and cheaply in black and white using his Alfred Hitchcock Presents television series crew. Paramount executives rejected this cost-conscious approach, claiming their sound stages were booked, but the industry was in a slump. So it sounds like if he thought this, it would have been in there somewhere.
Right.
Like he would have already
process.
been like starting and pitching Psycho.
Okay, yeah. Because that was like, a lot of this is framed as he saw this movie and decided to make Psycho. And I was like, I don't know that necessarily equates. It seems like, based on these timelines, it could have definitely been influential to him, especially like in his pitch meetings of like, hey, look, here are some examples. I can make this quick. I can make this cheap. Black and white, like.
Because also, the Psycho novel wasn't published until April 10th of 1959. So he could have seen House on Haunted Hill and gone, oh, right, I want to do that. What did Hitchcock sound like? That?
Yeah,
I'm sure that's
congrats,
what he sounded
that's
like.
him.
And then his assistant said in the Psycho novel, and he went, that's the one. And then he went, Paramount, let me make this. And they went, no. And then he went, please, I'll shoot it cheap, just like House on Haunted Hill. And they went, great. But all things said, there's no specific source on this.
Right.
So taking that into account, Parker, assuming that maybe this had a little tiny hand in getting Psycho to happen, does that give it enough lenience to take the point over Citizen Kane?
It has enough weight to make a conversation out of it, but it's no.
Right.
It's a very clear delineation.
Yeah.
But there is like people more well educated in like the subject than I have talked a lot about how like the William Castles and the Roger Cormans of film history like need to have space held for them, because it's like, hey, look, populist cinema was still cinema.
Yeah.
Like it's still, there's, again, like I think there are artistically interesting things going on in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Even as a schlocky B movie horror.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally.
But I mention that only to say that like it is not, I'm not dismissing the movie on this point for that reason. I'm not like, well, Citizen Kane is art and this is popcorn movie.
Right.
I'm dismissing it because it's House on Haunted Hill. The biggest innovation was Emergo, which only happened for this movie.
Right. If Emergo had like become a big thing, of course this would have a talking point.
Sure.
But when the most it can say is maybe it got Hitchcock to make Psycho. All right.
Well.
But I feel like the point would go to Psycho.
Right.
Because Psycho was Psycho, not this movie.
Well, it's a little bit like what we talked about when we were talking about Puss in Boots. Where we're like, okay, does this get the point or does Spider-Verse get that point?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I agree. Like
if we're talking a low budget horror movie that like changed the game.
Maybe inspired a better, bigger horror movie.
Yeah.
Maybe that bigger
maybe
horror
the bigger
movie's
one that did the low budget thing better.
Yeah.
Because Psycho isn't lazy.
No.
And you can easily describe what happened in it.
Totally.
So I'd still give the point to Citizen Kane.
I agree.
And I think that was the only thing this movie had at all. right? As far as like historical relevance.
Totally. That is
Yeah.
the only point of relevance there.
All right. Also, when you try to Google anything about this movie, it's like, did you mean The Haunting of Hill House? And I go, no.
Yeah, you get a lot of that.
Yeah.
Another weird tidbit for those of you who happen to be lovers and collectors of physical media. This movie is impossible to get on Blu-ray.
Yep.
It is so difficult. It's like the only official Blu-ray print that exists is in a box set of Vincent Price's movie, like collection 3 of the Vincent Price collection.
Right.
And it's like $200.
Yeah.
Bundled in with a bunch of movies you've never heard of.
That sounds pretty pricey.
But again, I just found that to be like an interesting point that you run into that sometimes, where like a movie that you're like, okay, you know, this is a fairly well-known, like Vincent Price movie, especially like this one gets tossed around in his like catalog a lot.
Yeah.
But just strangely hard to track down.
Yeah.
In like high definition. But this is one, we don't get this very often on the show. You could watch this movie right now on YouTube.
Yeah.
There are like 3 or 4 uploads of this movie because, again, public domain.
Might even be on Wikipedia.
Might
I
even
know that
be on
Wikipedia has like Carnival of Souls. Is on
Oh, sure,
Wikipedia. Yeah. Anyway,
how well is this movie doing what it's trying to do?
it's fine. Does the skeleton give me joy? Yes.
Of course.
Was it a little spooky? Kinda.
A little bit.
But I don't think it's doing anything better than Citizen Kane is doing what it's trying to do.
If its goal is trying to scare you, which
Yeah.
like most of like William Castle's thing was,
Yeah.
like, I think his biography is titled like The Man Who Scared America or something like that.
Bold.
Bold. I know, he goes for it. If that's his goal, no.
It's not that scary.
There is one moment of like genuine spookiness, which is like seeing like Annabelle's feet dangling when she's hung. Like
and that's scary.
That's
upsetting.
scary. The first time I watched it, I think like the close-up jump scare of like the old lady witch like spooked me a little bit.
Sure.
But other than that, no.
Because it's also not trying to be that scary.
No, it isn't.
It's mostly like a crime movie.
It's kind of a thriller more than it is a horror movie, but it's got,
but
again,
it's not even thrilling.
Haunted Hill. Like that's...
It's not very thrilling either.
No.
So I think Citizen Kane did that better, unfortunately.
Unfortunately,
Sorry,
yes.
House on Haunted Hill.
Sorry, buddy. All right, that's 2 out of 3, but...
Do you like this movie? Does it connect with you emotionally more than Citizen Kane?
Oh, it's... I'm embarrassed to say how close they are. Like, I watch this movie maybe once a year, if that. Some seasons I don't get to it, but I try to every year. It's a Halloween tradition for me. But the tradition is more enjoyable than the movie itself. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not watching the movie to watch the movie. I'm watching the movie to watch House on Haunted Hill.
Yeah.
Be like, all right, I did that for the season. That was my tradition. I did the thing.
Yeah.
But as far as like my litmus test of, okay, how often am I in the mood to turn this on versus how often am I in the mood to like turn on Citizen Kane, they're probably comparable.
Yeah.
Like maybe if the mood strikes me. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to give this one to House on Haunted Hill just because I want it to have something.
It needs a point.
And it's not going to win.
No.
And not every movie needs to win. This
course
movie wasn't trying to be better than Citizen Kane.
Right.
It was trying to make a lot of money very cheaply and to have a skeleton in it. And it did that.
It did those
incredibly well.
Absolutely.
So I think I'll just give it this one as just like a,
Sure.
Hey man,
Yeah. Throw him a bone.
throw him a bone.
I hate myself.
No, this isn't better than
No.
Citizen Kane.
No, of course not. Of course not. Listen, everybody. Sometimes there are movies we bring on here because I am interested to have the argument and the conversation of like, okay, this could well be, or it's a movie I really love. Sometimes you just want to watch a movie. And it just so happens to be like, you know, it would be really funny is to ask the question, is House on Haunted Hill better than Citizen Kane?
And no, it is not.
No. No, it is not.
But we talked about it.
We did talk about
You can't say we didn't talk about it. We gave it a fair chance.
We gave it a fair shake.
We did research.
We did.
I didn't even do research for Alien. So, and this is a really hard movie to do research about.
It is. Lesson learned. Take the easy ones.
Yeah, man. Take the easy ones. Well, great.
Oh, man.
That's that.
That's that. That was fun.
We covered it.
We
Happy
covered
Halloween,
it.
everyone.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Do a big lightning. I don't know. Was that to the audience or to the editor? I don't know. But do a big lightning.
Do a big lightning.
Thunder and a cackle. Not enough cackling these days.
Not enough cackling.
This Halloween, here's your homework for this week. Everyone do a big cackle.
Please. For us.
Like Vincent Price in Thriller. Just cackle. Cackle it out.
Just cackle it out.
Parker, what's next time?
Next time, we are having a very exciting guest star on with us. We're having our good mutual friend, Jake Nordfeldt.
Woo.
Jake is a connoisseur of film. Jake is very, very well educated in the breadth of like his taste in film and film history, and he's just somebody really fun to talk to about movies.
It's very true. Incredible collection, physical media collection, just impeccable.
Absolutely.
What movie is he bringing?
He is bringing Everything Everywhere All at Once.
2022 Best Picture winner. Won it this year.
Yeah. March.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, but anyway, I'm really excited to.
I'm stoked.
Jake has seen it
Well,
more
it's-
times than I
yeah.
think we can count.
Yeah, we'll let him tell the stories.
Of course.
But he's got quite the history with the movie.
He does.
And a lot of really fun tidbits to talk about.
I'm super excited.
I'm stoked.
It's going to be
great.
our most thorough episode.
Absolutely.
So look forward to that.
All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
But keep an eye out because the ghosts from this episode are coming for us. And then they'll come for you.
They'll come for you.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Take care.